Today on Locked On NFL Scouting, we're getting into my bold bets for the NFC Conference ahead of the 2025 season.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, typically joined by Joe Marino, flying solo this week on Bold Bets Week here on the program. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet with FanDuel wins. It's been a fun week so far. I'm getting ready to record this and then go listen to what Joe's bold bets are for the NFC Conference, which of course ran yesterday. Joe and I divide and conquer 1 week out of the year. And if this is your first episode of the week, if you're an NFC fan just catching this by passing, yesterday was Joe Marino, the other half of this show's bold bets for the NFC. First 2 days of the week was Joe and I independently going our separate ways, cooking up bold bets, and then we're going to come together and decide which ones we want to take each other up on for the year ahead. So it gives that little extra skin in the game, which makes it fun to watch all of the games play out, knowing that we're rooting for things so we can have bragging rights to one another. So with that in mind, we're going to start with the NFC South and then go to the North, the West, and the East to explore one bold prediction for every team in the NFC Conference in 2025. Let's get after it. We'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And all good things, as they say, must come to an end. And I think a good thing is going to come to an end for Mike Evans. His 1,000-yard consecutive season streak, I'm predicting, comes to a close this year. We got real close. We took it right down to the wire. The Bucs went out of their way to feed him a couple of balls late in week 18 to make sure he got over 1,000. He had 1,004 yards on the season. So they had to sweat it out a little bit. This is Mike's age 32 season. This is one of the most robust wide receiver rooms in all of football, with Chris Godwin being back and obviously their first round draft choice in Emeka Egbuka. They have a really promising run game platform to be able to build on as well. I think this is the year. So Father Time is undefeated. Mike sweated it out. Give me Mike Evans under 999.5 receiving yards in 2025. For the Atlanta Falcons, I'm going the other way. I'm buying high. Drake London stocks. I'm buying all of them. Drake London, in the games with Michael Penix last year, ran 99 routes in the games with Michael Penix at quarterback, and he was targeted on 40% of those 99 routes, and they were happening several yards further downfield per target. So Drake London was one of the most targeted receivers in football last year. He had over 100 catches. He had 8 touchdowns. He had over 1,000 yards. There's only a handful of guys that did that. He didn't get any accolades, but I think the Penix style of play, and I think the chemistry that they showcased with one another early on, I think it's going to be hard to top 158 targets or whatever it was for Drake London. I think he will end up getting more yards per target, and by extension, I think he goes over 1,500 yards for Drake London. So a couple of wide receiver ones to get us rolling here. The Carolina Panthers, my next team in the NFC South. I think Bryce Young doubles his career passing touchdowns in 2025. So through 2 seasons, Bryce has 26 passing touchdowns. So you are setting the line at 26 or higher for passing touchdowns for Bryce Young. And he obviously did show the growth that he showed throughout the course of the year last year. I'm buying that. I'm buying year 2 with Canales. I'm buying some better pieces in the supporting cast. I'm buying the offensive line being back and gelling again. So I think Bryce can really build on what he put together once he came back into the starting lineup in the back half of the season. And I think he's going to have an efficient year, and you need to average it's 1.5 passing touchdowns per game across a 17-game sample size. If he doesn't get hurt, I think he gets there. So Bryce Young, 26 passing touchdowns or more. Bold bet. The New Orleans Saints, last team here in the South, and apologies to Saints fans, but I don't see it. I think the quarterback situation with Tyler Shuck and coming in as an older rookie, but the durability questions that he has, and Spencer Rattler with Kellen Moore coming in with the first year in the scheme, and they've got young players on the offensive line mixed with some limited depth on the offensive line. You've got injury concerns with a lot of the skill players. Defensively, the secondaries kind of had like this slow bleed of talent. They have a lot of aging players in the back seven. I think this team finishes at least tied for the worst record in football this year. And it's tough because Atlanta you perceive as ascending in year two. Carolina ascending in year two, with young quarterbacks. Tampa, obviously the cream of the crop. I think everybody else in this division is building towards a vision for what they want to be, where New Orleans is still, his transition's been longer, in part because of how they've handled some of their salary cap management for 4, 5, 6 years now. So I think the Saints finish tied at least for the worst record in football in 2025. It's my bold bet for the Saints. We're going to shift gears, go to the North. Hope I didn't lose too many of you there. Too many Saints fans who just rage quit the podcast. If you did, that's okay. I could keep talking about it and you wouldn't know if you rage quit. But we're going to go to the NFC North, which was arguably the most competitive division in football last year. We're going to dive into that next here. Locked on NFL Scouting. Make sure you guys stick with us. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel's the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. I have my eyes, as we're getting ready to do the NFC South, I have my eyes on the futures bets for the NFC South on FanDuel. Detroit at plus 155, Green Bay at plus 260, Minnesota at plus 270. Chicago, if you like the long odds and you're buying their overhaul, plus 550 for Chicago. So I think there's some favorable, you're getting plus returns on all four teams depending on what direction that you want to go. So if you're new to FanDuel, you could take $5 and turn it into $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. The NFC North. We'll start with the Detroit Lions, who, of course, won this division last year with a 15-2 record. Detroit's had a tough offseason, right, where Ragnow retires. You've got guys coming back off of injuries. Lee McNeil's injury at the end of the year last year. Both coordinators leave, so there's some coaching interruptions. There's obviously a first-place schedule for Detroit. They finished as the 1 seed in the NFC last year. I think they're built for sustained success, but I think the peak of this success is going to come down a little bit, especially in this division. I have Detroit finishing third in the NFC North in 2025. But I do believe that they will ultimately be a playoff team when it's all said and done. So I believe Detroit's a wild card team this year. I have them third in the NFC North, and I don't have any real convictions. I would assume it's Green Bay and Minnesota in front of them. I'm still a big fan of Jordan Love. I love a lot of things about Minnesota, with the big question obviously being J.J. McCarthy. We'll go to Minnesota next, who won 14 games and had to go on the road in the playoffs in the wild card round. I think by the end of 2025, Justin Jefferson will be in second place on the Minnesota Vikings all-time receiving yards list. That might sound crazy because they had Chris Carter and Randy Moss, right? I mean, they've have had a number of very productive wide receivers. And Justin Jefferson has played nowhere near as many games as Randy Moss, but he's less than 1,900 yards away from passing Randy Moss. It's 1,886 passing yards to be exact. And I know Hawkinson's back and healthy. I know Jordan Addison is a really talented player. I believe there's a potential for a suspension there. Aaron Jones in the running game. You got Justin Jefferson, right? And if I could take the bold bet to say, hey, he's going to go over 1,800 yards, which he's pushed for it not that long ago, I will do so as a bold bet. Now, it's at least scaled back for me. I've kind of done the 2,000-yard wide receiver watch the last couple of years. Hasn't come to materialize. But Justin Jefferson, 1,886 yards. He passes Randy Moss on the Vikings all-time receiving list in 2025. It's my bold bet for Minnesota. And keep it with wide receivers in going to the Green Bay Packers, who for the first time in forever used their first-round draft choice on a wide receiver. Matthew Golden from Texas was Green Bay's first-round pick. My bold bet is pertaining to Matthew Golden, and I was a big Matthew Golden fan. I really like Matthew Golden. But as I look at the projection for Matthew Golden into the 2025 Packers offense, I do have a bit of a hard time with how big of a role, even if he plays a valuable role without the football, how big of a target share role is he going to get on an offense that has Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks, and at some point Christian Watson is expected to be back. I know there was a season-ending injury there last year, the end of the year. Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs. You get a lot to spread the football around too. And they also used a third-round draft choice on Savion Williams, and I don't expect Savion Williams to have a bigger target opportunity than Matthew Golden. But if I said Matthew Golden's going to run a lot of your Z receiver stuff, Jaden Reed, that way you free him up to play in the slot. You either use Wicks or Dobbs in isolation. If Tucker Kraft, and then you have a back out of the backfield. I don't think there's going to be too many targets. Not to say he doesn't have value, but the target share I don't think is going to be super high. And because the target share is not going to be super high, I think he finishes 5th or lower on the team in receptions and receiving yards in 2025. Now, I think receiving yards is going to be a harder opportunity for him to stay out of, because I do expect that this is a team that is going to have home run play opportunities with Golden, and he might get some explosive plays as a result of that. But I'm trying to be bold, right? The objective is to not come up here and hit a couple layups and then sit here and brag about how Joe couldn't beat me with any of my bets, right? Like, I don't want to do that. I want to actually be bold. So I think you have featured player opportunities with Kraft and Reed. And then it's a matter of, can Dobbs, Wicks, plus Williams, plus the backs water it down enough where Golden is a space creator more than he is an actual target? And that's kind of the question I have for year one, Matthew Golden. And this will sort itself out because they got a lot of young guys. They're probably not going to pay them all. Right. So I think the role will grow for Matthew Golden in time. But year one, I'm going to go bold. The Chicago Bears, last team in the NFC North. I still think Caleb Williams, despite the offensive line overhaul that happened, right, where there was a lot invested in this group with established players, right, where this team trades for Joe Thuney and they trade for Jonah Jackson and they draft Ozzie Trapilo in the second round and they sign Drew Dahlman. They bring in another tight end so they could probably have wider front surfaces and wider edges to kind of help with Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland. And they brought in Durham Smythe so that you could see the vision for Ben Johnson's team. I still think Caleb Williams is going to finish this year with at least an 8% sack rate, which I don't know how hot Joe is going to consider that, but I think that's a hot enough number that this can go as a bold bet. Now, he was sacked 10.79% of dropbacks last year, led the league in sacks at 68. But 8% with this offensive line I thought about doing a number. I was going to do 50, but I'm not sure that they're going to pass the ball enough with Ben Johnson and the offensive line infusion and what they're trying to do from a style of play perspective. I don't know that he's going to get the dropbacks at 8% to hit 50. So I'll just say 8% of Caleb Williams dropbacks. And there's been a lot of discourse about the offensive line and the scheme, but some of this is just the style of play. It's the Cam Ward thing that we did on Tuesday when I had that bold bet about Cam Ward leading the league in sack yardage lost amongst, to be the third consecutive number one overall pick to lead the league in sack yardage lost. It's the same. They have that same gene. How do you learn how to ride the lightning? And Caleb's in that process, and you'll probably put some more bumpers around him to help prevent that. But I still think that's kind of how he's coded. We have time for a couple of teams in the NFC West. So we will start with the LA Rams, who I think win the NFC conference in 2025. I know that's not the most hot take, but I did it with the AFC side of things with Baltimore. Joe will have the opportunity to take the Rams versus the field. The defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles are in this division or in this conference. Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, potentially Dallas, Washington feels highly about themselves. Tampa Bay, the 49ers. There's a lot of teams that will have potentially something to say about this. And I'll be interested to see if Joe takes me up on Team X versus the field to win the conference. I have the Rams winning the NFC. So my Super Bowl prediction as a result, based on what I said on Thursday, was Baltimore versus LA Rams, the Super Bowl. I have a lot of fun with that one. The Seattle Seahawks. This one is very bold, but I am indoctrinated by the Church of Mike McDonald, so I'm a believer. Seattle defense finishes top 8, upper quartile in points, yards, and turnovers defensively. So buying big-time stock on Seattle to stand out in a big way across the three major metrics of defensive success. Now, Seattle last year, they ranked 11th in points, 14 in yards, and they were 23rd in turnover differential. But from actual turnovers created, they were 16th. So I think there's significant jumps from middle of the pack to upper quarter of the league in all three of those numbers. The closest that they were for top 8 in any of those was points, where they were 11th last year. But year 2 of the scheme, they got a bunch of weapons on the back end. I like their front composition. I really like Leonard Williams fitting into this. Feels like they figured out their linebacker situation. You obviously saw San Francisco with an exodus of some talent. Arizona didn't really do a lot to upgrade a lot of the pieces on their offense, so they're kind of status quo there. They were focused on their defense. So I don't think the divisional opportunities are really going to stonewall them, if you will. Now, we're going to do the other half of the NFC West and then finish with the NFC East on the other side of the break. Make sure that you guys stick with us. We'll be right back. Okay. San Francisco 49ers. Give me 1,000 yards for Pretty Ricky Pearsall. I love Pretty Ricky coming out of Florida. Obviously had a rough start to his NFL career last year. Was robbed and shot at the beginning of the season. And obviously it's a very scary situation, and it kind of puts football in perspective a little bit more as for an individual, but managed to come back and it was a contributor. And Deebo Samuel's gone. Brandon Ayuk's coming off of an injury. Juwan Jennings wants a new contract or a trade. You still have George Kittle. You have Christian McCaffrey back. I think Pearsall is the first-round pick from 24 in year 2. I know what kind of route runner he is. I'm buying Ricky Pearsall. I think he'll obviously have a much bigger opportunity this year, and I think he'll do a lot with it. And I do think their offense is going to be productive. Productive enough to the point where I would expect if Jennings, Pearsall, and Ayuk are all healthy at some point, and the big wild card here is when is Ayuk healthy, because you still have George Kittle. I think they'll have 2 1,000-yard receivers in the passing game out of all of their options. I think Pearsall will be one. Arizona. James Conner sets a career high in rushing yards. This is we did this when we did the Cardinals spotlight here on the show. James Fine Wine Conner, 2 consecutive years over 1,000 yards. Took him until his age 28 season to go over 1,000 yards, and then reset the career high in rushing yards again in 2024 as a 29-year-old running back. He just turned 30 in May. I think he does it again. I think this is 3 consecutive seasons as a late 20s, early 30s running back, setting career high in rushing yards. So big fan of James Conner, and especially as the hammer to that offense. And you look at what they have in their backfield, and Trey Benson had an opportunity last year and didn't really do a lot with it. What's standing in James Conner's way if he's healthy? I think that's a fair question to ask. DeMercado and DJ Dallas? No, I'll fade it. Give me James Conner. Career high in rushing yards, 2025. Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. My bold bet here is that somebody not named Jalen Hurts is going to lead this team in rushing touchdowns for the first time since Jalen Hurts' rookie season. Saquon Barkley got close last year. Hurts has done it every year since the year after his rookie season when he was a part-time player. Barkley was within one rushing touchdown of Hurts last year and was the least lucky runner in football for the amount of times that he was tackled inside the 2-yard line. So just break a couple more tackles at the end of runs, and I think you'll get it. And then by extension, Hurts will have less tush-push opportunities, and you will score more touchdowns. So Saquon Barkley leads the Eagles in rushing touchdowns. Nobody has not named Hurts has done that in 4 years. The Dallas Cowboys. Miles Sanders leads this team in rushing yards. This is a really fascinating one for me because Sanders has obviously not had a couple of productive seasons since leaving Philadelphia. But you look at the running back room, and Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jadon Blue, and Phil Maffa are the top 4 names in the running back room, plus Deuce Vaughn, and however you want to put Deuce Vaughn into that conversation. But Miles Sanders has had 55 and 129 rushes in the last 2 seasons combined. He's averaged 3.5 yards per carry. I think life will be a little better for him in Dallas. And I know Carolina invested assets into their interior offensive line, and we perceive them to have a good interior offensive line. But that Dave Canales rushing offense at times is just mash it up in there and get 3 and do it twice, and we'll set up favorable third downs. And we can play pass off of it, or we can go quick game off of it, or if we feel like they're loading us up, but we could protect them up, we'll take shots. You contrast that to Javonte Williams. My concern with Javonte Williams is he was never really the most explosive guy. And then he had the injury 2 years ago, and he's really lost a lot of explosiveness. He's averaged 3.6 and 3.7 yards per carry the last 2 seasons. And when he was the marquee player in Dallas, in Denver, in 2023, he had 264 touches and averaged 3.8 yards per touch, not per carry, per touch. That includes the passing game and 47 receptions in the passing game. He caught more balls this year. He was targeted 70 times. So you know exactly what he is. It's not a high-yield player. And I think Miles Sanders gives you a better chance to, assuming he's healthy, be a little bit more balanced with what you can bring to the table, and he'll have a lot more open air to run behind in Dallas than what he did in Carolina. Washington, Jaden Daniels over 999.5 rushing yards. I think he gets like the Lamar Jackson level, 3,500 plus passing yards, 1,000 rushing yards. I think he could lead this team in rushing yards. Not necessarily by design, but you do know that they have that in their bag. So I think Daniels becomes the next quarterback to rush for 1,000 yards in a season. A lot of it will be outside of structure, on passing plays, making something happen. You saw how potent and explosive he was at that, not just last year, but during his time at LSU. And I think he can put that on a bigger display this year if he needs to, as long as he protects himself. Which brings us to the New York Giants, who I feel really bad for because I look at their defense. I think they've made a lot of big strides. I look at their offense and say, okay, there's some more stability with the weaponry. There's some more stability with the offensive line. You've got a improved quarterback room. Although I don't have a great deal of confidence in Russell Wilson's ability to execute the scheme, and that's part of why I have the take that I have. But it all ties back to quarterback play and the schedule. The Giants will have one win at Halloween, but Brian Daboll will still coach all 17 games. So I do not think this team starts particularly well because the schedule, if we're being honest, the schedule sucks for them. And I feel bad for them in that regard because I could see this being a much better football team than the 3-14 team that it was last year, but you're at Washington, at Dallas. I don't know that I pick them to win out of one of those games right now. Could they win them? Sure. I think they could win either one. But then you have Kansas City and the Chargers. At New Orleans, I would pick you to win. And then your last 3 games before Halloween are home against Philadelphia on a short week, at Denver, and at Philadelphia. You talk about a murderer's row, right? Washington, Kansas City, the Chargers, the Eagles twice, and the Broncos. And then on November 2nd, they play San Francisco. Then they have at Chicago, and then they have home against Green Bay and at Detroit for the first 12 weeks of the season. Like realistically, if you get 3 wins out of that stretch, you probably overachieved. And then you have at New England, Washington again after the bye, Minnesota. Like they should win more football games, but I don't see a lot of wins early on the schedule. But because of some of the dynamics with the schedule and the quarterback play and figuring that out and developing Jackson Dart, I think Daboll will coach the entire season. So that's it. That's going to do it for my hot takes around the NFC conference. Hope you guys enjoyed. We are off tomorrow. And then Joe and I are going to get back on the horn on Monday and decide which one of these bold bets we want to take each other up on. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On NFL Scouting. It is your teams every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a good one. I'll talk to you all again soon.